They say pain has a sound. Mine was a low, guttural scream echoing through a too-white room that smelled of bleach and sterile metal. I gripped the railings of the hospital bed with fingers that had long since gone numb. Sweat pooled in the hollows of my collarbone. My legs trembled under the weight of another contraction. And still, he wasn't there. He promised. God, he promised. Between labored breaths and the nurse's steady voice counting backward. Breathe, push, breathe again. My eyes darted to the door. Every creak, every shuffle outside made my heart leap like a dog waiting for its master. And every second that passed, it fell a little harder. "Where's the father?" one of the nurses whispered to another. My stomach clenched tighter than any contraction. I wanted to lie. Say he was parking the car. Say he got caught in traffic. But I didn't have the breath left for fiction. Instead, I pushed through another wave of pain, and a scream tore from my throat like something primal. I felt like I was splitting in two. And not just physically. There was something deeper, rawer, the fracture of hope. Then, just like that, she arrived. My daughter entered, the world in a burst of blood and wailing light, and for one suspended moment everything stopped. The nurse lifted her, slick, pink, furious at the cold air, and placed her gently onto my chest. I remember the weight of her, so impossibly small, so entirely mine. She had wisps of dark hair, my nose, his jawline. I wanted to love her without pain, but I was already grieving the version of myself I used to be, the woman who believed him. "Congratulations, Mama," the nurse whispered, her eyes kind, maybe even a little pitying. I didn't answer. My throat was full of things I didn't dare say, like he said he wouldn't miss it, like I waited for you until the final scream. The room eventually quieted. Machines hummed. The nurses left us alone. I remember staring at the fluorescent lights, watching them blur and streak as tears filled my eyes but refused to fall. I didn't cry. Not then. I just lay there, her tiny breath rising and falling on my chest. The ache of labor still deep in my bones. The silence was louder than anything else. It wasn't until 2 hours later. 2 hours and 17 minutes. To be exact, that my phone buzzed on the tray table beside me. I didn't want to look, but I did. "Sorry, babe. Got stuck at the game." "Big hand. She okay?" "A poker game. A fucking poker game. Not a flat tire. Not an emergency. Not even a lie worth selling." My fingers hovered over the screen. My thumb twitched toward the reply icon. I wanted to scream at him through the pixels. Wanted to tell him what he missed. How she'd opened her eyes for the first time. How her hand curled instinctively around my finger. How I'd whispered promises to a newborn she would never understand, but I meant them anyway. Instead, I deleted the message. Just like that. As if it had never arrived. As if he hadn't confirmed, with 11 casual words, everything I had been afraid to admit. He wasn't coming. Not really. He hadn't been coming for a long time. The nurses returned. I smiled politely. I let them take her for her first bath. For weighing, for charts and paperwork and 1,000 little things I was too tired to understand. Alone, in that antiseptic room, I finally let the tears come. Not the kind that fall with noise, but the kind that slide quietly down your temples and into your hairline, leaving behind trails of salt and ruin. That's when I noticed my wedding ring. I had worn it without thought for 3 years. Gold, thin, plain, no diamonds. He said flashy rings were a waste of money, and I agreed back then. We were building a life, not a jewelry box. But as I twisted it slowly, something in me recoiled. It felt heavy, not in weight, but in meaning. A shackle dressed as a promise. I pulled it off. There was a pale indentation beneath it, like a scar the sun couldn't touch. A ghost of who I used to be. When they brought my daughter back, swaddled in soft blankets that smelled faintly of lavender detergent, I held her close and studied her face. "You deserved better," I whispered. My voice cracked like old porcelain, pressed my lips to her forehead. So did I. And for the first time that day, maybe the first time in years, I felt something crack open inside me. Not pain, not sorrow, not even anger, just clarity. Before everything went silent, before hospital beds and unread texts and a ring abandoned in a drawer, there was a boy with a crooked grin and a glint in his eye that made me feel seen. Ryan. He had this wild, unpredictable energy, like a summer storm that could be dangerous but made you want to dance in the rain anyway. I met him at a friend's rooftop party, surrounded by string lights and laughter and the smell of cheap wine and grilled corn. He talked about poker the way some people talk about religion, with conviction, with ritual, with the belief that it revealed something true about the universe. Luck, he told me that night, is just preparation meeting timing. And I'm always prepared. It should have sounded arrogant, but instead, it felt like a promise. I'd spent most of my life playing it safe. He made risk sound like freedom. I was 26, a freelance designer with a studio apartment full of sketch pads and chipped coffee mugs. My mother used to say I had an old soul. I think that's a nice way of saying I didn't go out much. Ryan was my opposite, full of momentum, always chasing the next big thing. He swept me into his orbit with ease. Dates turned into weekends. His stuff slowly appeared in my apartment: a shaving kit, a pair of boots, poker chips in the junk drawer. He brought color into my grayscale world. I didn't notice when my boundaries began to blur. Or maybe I did, and just didn't care. The first time I saw him at a table, I watched him transform. He wasn't just playing cards. He was performing, reading people, bluffing, winning. He was magnetic. Later that night, he said, "You're my lucky charm." I remember blushing like it was a compliment, as if luck was love. We moved in together after 6 months. My mother was skeptical. She always had a radar for charm worn like armor. She once asked me, "What does he do exactly?" I gave her the kind of answer I now recognize as a red flag. He's figuring things out. But I was in love. Deeply, hungrily. The kind of love that makes excuses and ignores the whispering voice that says wait. Ryan pitched the idea of a YouTube poker channel just after our first anniversary. He had the branding idea already, Royal Flush Life, said it would mix lifestyle with strategy, make poker sexy again. I designed the logo, filmed his first few videos on my phone, used some of my savings to buy a decent mic and camera. He promised it would pay off. He always promised. The views trickled in. Not much, but enough to keep the dream alive. Meanwhile, I worked. Designed for small businesses, juggled invoices, paid rent, paid utilities, paid attention. But love has a strange way of turning into obligation without you noticing. When we decided to buy a house, I was the one who applied for the mortgage. Ryan's credit was complicated, but he said we were building something together, and I believed him. The house was small, 2-bedroom, with creaky floors and too much beige, but it had a porch and morning light that spilled into the kitchen like honey. I painted the nursery myself, even before I was pregnant. I wanted that hope on the walls. When I found out I was expecting, I held the test in my hand for 10 minutes before I could breathe. I imagined what our child might look like. I thought of bedtime stories and little socks and lullabies hummed into soft ears. When I told Ryan, he looked at me for a long moment and then said, "Okay, we'll figure it out." That wasn't the reaction I'd hoped for. But I held on to the word, we like a lifeline. We started prepping, or rather, I did. I made lists, bought books, researched car seats. He kept filming, kept going to tournaments, kept calling every weekend. Game a big one. I told myself he was just scared, that men take longer to connect, that he'd change when he held her. It's funny the lies we tell ourselves when the truth feels like betrayal. The months passed. My body changed. My world narrowed. I spent hours imagining who she'd be. I talked to the bump, played music to her at night. I kept designing, but slower. He kept saying he'd cut back. He didn't. One night, 8 months in, I asked him to skip a weekend tournament. "Just this once," I said. "Let's do a stay-in night, just us." He looked at me like I'd asked him to amputate a limb. "Babe," he said, "you know how important this game is." I nodded, said it was fine, said I understood. That was the night I stopped wearing perfume. He used to love the lavender one I wore, the one in the small glass bottle with a ribbon tied around the neck. But I stopped that night. It felt like a lie to put it on. The days blurred after that. My back ached. I nested. I waited. The night I went into labor, he was at another game. I called. He didn't pick up. Texted him. No reply. I didn't want to panic. I wanted to believe he'd show up. But as I sat in the passenger seat of the Uber, clenching the armrest, staring at the blur of headlights, I felt the full weight of what I'd built. Not a life together, but a scaffolding I held up alone. House on sand. A ring of promises. A man who gambled with everything, including me. After the hospital, everything slowed down. Not in the peaceful way they tell you newborn days do, but in the kind of way that makes you feel like time is holding its breath and refusing to exhale. The house was quiet in a sharp, eerie way, like the silence right before a storm touches down. I moved through it like a ghost, nursing, changing diapers, heating bottles, folding laundry. There were moments I forgot to eat, whole mornings I lost track of. Ryan wasn't around much. When he was, he hovered like a visitor, out of sync with the rhythm of this new life we were supposed to share. He'd step over a basket of unfolded clothes to grab his keys. He'd kiss the baby's forehead like she was a good luck charm, then disappeared to clear his head. Some nights, he'd come home smelling like cologne I didn't wear. Other times, he reeked of whiskey in poker rooms, a scent I'd once found thrilling, now curdling in my throat. "I'm just not used to all this crying," he mumbled once, wiping his hands on a towel while our daughter screamed in the background. "It's like living in a fog." "No," I wanted to say. "This is the fog you left me in." But I stayed silent. I was too tired to fight, too hollow to scream. I'd lost sleep, blood, and illusions, but not yet the last pieces of myself. Then came the receipt. It was a small, crumpled paper I found in the pocket of his black bomber jacket while doing laundry. I almost missed it, but I flattened it on the kitchen counter, blinking at the numbers. $2,000, Golden Oak Casino. Dated the night I gave birth. I stood there, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly deafening, holding that paper like it was radioactive. My baby cooed from the bassinet in the corner. The sky outside was gray. When he got home that night, I didn't even raise my voice. I just placed the receipt on the coffee table and said, "You missed your daughter's birth for this?" He squinted at it, then shrugged. It was a big tournament, once in a lifetime. I stared at him, disbelief clamping down around my ribs. "She was once in a lifetime, Ryan." He rolled his eyes, flopping onto the couch like this was just another minor inconvenience. "I don't know why you're making this into a thing. She's fine. You're fine." That's when something inside me snapped. Not like glass, but like thread, unraveling, slow and deliberate. But the thread kept pulling. A few days later, I was trying to print a design invoice from our shared iPad. I opened Safari and there it was. His text messages still logged in. A banner popped up before I even touched anything. Bree. That pic you sent last night? Miss you already. I froze. My hand hovered above the screen. My breath caught in my throat. Then, with the quiet control of someone too shattered to shake, I clicked into the conversation. Pictures. Emojis. Secrets. The texts spanned weeks. Jokes about my mom hair, her calling him daddy in ways that made my stomach churn. She asked if he'd be free next weekend. He said he was tired of playing house. I scrolled. I kept scrolling. When the baby cried from the bassinet, I jumped, like I'd forgotten she was real. I confronted him that night, iPad in hand. I didn't. Throw it. Didn't scream. I showed him. He blinked. Then he smirked. Actually smirked. Jesus, Amelia, it's just flirting, he said, leaning back like we were having a debate over cereal brands. You're hormonal. You've been off since the baby came. I stared at him. It's not just flirting, I said quietly. He laughed. You always do this. You twist things into something they're not. I remember the light flickering above us, the smell of milk on my shirt, the wedding photo still hanging crooked in the hallway from the last time he slammed the door. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked into the bathroom, took off my wedding ring, the same one I'd left on the hospital sink once, but picked up, again out of habit, and placed it carefully on the edge of the counter. This time, I didn't look back. That night, I packed a diaper bag with trembling hands. A few onesies, diapers, her favorite blanket with the stitched yellow moons. I grabbed my sketch pad, wallet, and keys. She didn't wake when I buckled her into the car seat. The rain was coming down in sheets as I pulled out of the driveway. The house disappeared in my rearview mirror like a fading photograph. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. 2 towns over, I checked into a budget motel off the highway. The night clerk didn't ask questions. The wallpaper, peeled at the corners. The lights buzzed faintly overhead. I laid her down in the center of the motel bed, surrounded her with pillows. I sat at the edge of the mattress, staring out the window at the wet asphalt reflecting streetlights. I didn't cry. I just breathed. For the first time in months, the air filled my lungs without a hitch. And that was something. The motel room smelled faintly of bleach and cigarette smoke, even though the sign outside promised non-smoking. The walls were the color of wheat coffee, and the only window overlooked a gas station. Still, it was the safest I'd felt in months. I'd bought a bottle of milk from the vending machine in the lobby, the kind with the plastic screw cap and foil seal. My daughter drank it greedily, eyes half-lidded, lashes brushing her cheeks, like tiny question marks. That night, I slept in my jeans with her pressed against me, one of her fists curled beneath my chin. I stared at the water-stained ceiling tiles and listened to the hum of the broken heater kicking in and out. And for once, I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid of going back. The next morning, I filed for legal separation. I did it online, through blurry vision and trembling fingers. I didn't have a plan, just a knowing. A thread pulling me forward, soft but certain. I called one person. Lana. We hadn't talked in months. She was an old friend from college, the kind of woman who wore wool sweaters in the summer and always kept dried lavender by her windows. She answered on the first ring. Amelia, she said, her voice cracking like it had been waiting. I didn't say much, just, I left. Her answer came like breath. Come here. 2 hours later, I pulled into her gravel driveway, past the crooked mailbox, and the patch of marigolds still blooming stubbornly in the October chill. Her farmhouse sat nestled between wide fields and sighing trees. It looked like somewhere, Time had chosen to rest instead of pass. She gave me the guest room, small, warm, slanted ceiling, and a bed with a quilt that smelled like cedar. "You can stay as long as you need," she said. No questions, just tea and warmth and silence when I needed it. The cracked mirror on the wall tilted slightly to the left. I never fixed it. It felt honest, reflecting me the way I really was. Imperfect, worn, surviving. I cried once, really cried, that second night. Not because of Ryan, but because I hadn't realized how long I'd gone without being safe. Motherhood alone is brutal and beautiful in equal measure. The nights blurred into one another, feedings, lullabies, rocking back and forth until my spine ached. But in between the exhaustion, something bloomed. I started drawing again. It began with a napkin, sketch. Just a pencil outline of a mother with shadows under her eyes, holding a baby like a shield and a treasure. I didn't know I'd needed to see her until I finished. I started sketching more, in my notebook, on the backs of receipts, inside the blank pages of old bills I never sent. The images poured out like truth. A woman standing in a rainstorm, while the house behind her burned. A baby asleep in a cracked teacup. A pair of hands, one holding a wedding ring, the other holding a flame. I posted one of them online, anonymously. No hashtags, no captions. Just release. It went viral overnight. Someone reshared it, then someone else. Within a week, I had thousands of messages. Women, mothers, strangers. All of them saying, "This is me. You drew me." For the first time, I wasn't invisible. I started taking commissions again. Quietly. Logos, portraits, small things at first. The money trickled in, enough for diapers, for food. Lana wouldn't take a cent from me, but I started paying for groceries. It felt like staking a flag in the soil of my new life. At night, after I put my daughter down, I read books on trauma, on healing, on financial independence. Sometimes I just stared out the window and watched the wind run its fingers through the wheat fields. Then one night, after I shared a sketch titled "The Woman Who Stayed Too Long," I got a message from a woman named Ruth. She was older, direct, kind. "Your art is more than art," she wrote. "It's testimony. I run a local women's circle. Would you come?" I almost said no. The thought of sitting in a circle and speaking out loud made my skin itch. But something in her words, testimony, pulled at me. I went. The room was filled with soft laughter, warm hands, and stories that sounded like echoes of my own. One woman had fled in the middle of the night with 2 toddlers. Another had taken a decade to leave. One had stayed too long. One had left too soon. All of them carried invisible wounds stitched with survival. I told my story in pieces, halting, careful. But they listened like it was scripture. After the circle, Ruth pulled me aside. "I used to be a divorce attorney," she said. "I'm retired now, but I still consult. Let me help you." For a moment, I didn't speak. Then I nodded. Thank you didn't seem big enough, but it was all I had. Ryan started texting again around week 4. At first it was pleading. "Come home. Let's talk." Then guilt. "You're hurting our daughter. You're being dramatic." Then anger. "You're nothing without me. You're just a tired little girl with a baby." I saved them all. Every message. Every screenshot. Proof. There was a day, once, when I would have read those words and flinched, believed them, even apologized, but not anymore. There was power in quiet, in knowing the truth and not needing to scream it, in standing still when someone tried to shake you. I wasn't healed. Not fully. Some mornings I still woke with dread in my throat. Some nights I still missed the idea of him. But I didn't want him back. I didn't even want revenge. I just wanted peace. And that, I was learning, started with refusing to shrink. I'd spent years becoming small, so he could feel big. Now I was learning how to take up space. Even if that space was a small farmhouse room with a crooked mirror and a baby who trusted me more than I'd ever trusted, myself. There was a day I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. Not because I looked broken, but because I didn't. My skin still held the fine cracks of grief. My body still bore the stretch and sag of motherhood. But my eyes were steady, calm. The cracked mirror in Lana's farmhouse hadn't changed, but the woman reflected in it had. My daughter was crawling now, fast and curious and fearless. Every time she pulled herself up on the windowsill or babbled at the cat, I felt something anchor inside me. Not fear, not duty, pride. The sketches that once spilled out of me like pain now came with intention. My little online shop was thriving. People bought prints, commissioned pieces, wrote letters telling me how my lines and shadows told their story. It was art, but it was also a lighthouse. For them, for me, money trickled in. Then it flowed. I paid off my credit card, cleared out the last of the debt Ryan had ignored, bought a new laptop, replaced the nursing bras with real lingerie. Nothing fancy, just mine. The farmhouse room had changed too. What used to be survival space now bloomed, with soft light, clean linens, and color. My daughter's laughter echoed down the hall in the mornings. I hung a wind chime by the window. It sang softly every time the wind touched it. And then, one afternoon while organizing files for Ruth, I found the old bank login. Out of habit, I clicked through. There it was, the joint account Ryan swore he hadn't touched. Negative balance. He'd drained it dry. No warning, no explanation. My hands didn't shake this time. I printed the statement, added it to the folder, slid in copies of his texts, the manipulations, the threats, the apologies, laced with venom. It was all evidence now, no longer ghosts. Ruth and I met once a week. She walked me through each step with the patience of someone who had seen too many women give up halfway through. But I wasn't giving up. Not anymore. I don't remember what made me do it. Maybe it was curiosity or closure, or just the lingering ache of not understanding. But one night, after my daughter fell asleep on my chest, I started researching poker, not watching Ryan's old videos. I couldn't stomach his voice, but real games, strategy, psychology, the mechanics of risk. I wanted to understand why he gambled with everything, why the cards had more gravity than his child, than me. At first, I just watched. Then I played online, tiny stakes, just for fun. But I liked it. The patterns, the patience. The way you could read a person by how long they hesitated before calling. I started playing at local amateur nights. Coffee shop games, charity rounds, small-town tables. I never pretended to be good. I just wanted to know. Turns out I was better than I thought. Not because I had a good poker face, but because I no longer had anything to prove. I folded when I needed to, called when it mattered. I stopped chasing hands. I watched. I listened. There was a power in it. Quiet, controlled. Not like Ryan's version of poker, all bravado and ego. Mine was different, strategic, patient, honest. I kept the winnings in a small wooden box Lana gave me. I never spent it. It was sacred, a symbol of learning, not survival. Then one day, I heard about the River Bloom Invitational, a local high-stakes charity tournament held once, a year at Golden Oak Casino, the same casino Ryan had disappeared to the night I gave birth. At first, I smiled at the irony. Then I opened the application. The night of the game, I dressed slowly. Not in armor, but in clarity. A long black dress, clean lines, nothing showy. Just elegant. Red lipstick, the same shade Ryan once said made me look too intense. Hair pinned back, just enough to show my jawline. I left the perfume behind, the lavender bottle still full, still untouched, and wore something new. Soft sandalwood, faint vanilla. Earthy. Rooted. Mine. Before I left, I kissed my daughter's forehead. She was asleep, her chubby fists curled like she was holding onto the sky. I whispered, "Thank you for saving me." Then I slipped the custom deck of cards I'd designed into my purse. Each face painted with women I'd drawn. Survivors, mothers, dreamers. The Queen of Hearts wore a tired expression and a crown of daisies. Golden Oak looked exactly as I remembered. Glossy, loud, full of smoke and tension. But I wasn't the same. As I walked through the doors, I caught my name on the check-in list. Amelia Hart. VIP entry. Not +1. Not guest of. Not wife of. Just me. I spotted Ryan before he saw me. He was leaning against the bar, all swagger and stubble, but faded, like a once golden statue weathered by neglect. He wasn't playing, just watching. His name wasn't on the list. When he saw me, his face flickered with something I couldn't place. Surprise, maybe. Or fear dressed in arrogance. He pushed off the bar and walked toward me. "Well, look who's here," he said. "Didn't think you were the poker type." "I wasn't," I said simply. Then again, I wasn't the leaving type either. He blinked, his mouth tightening. "You know, this isn't a joke table. Stakes are real." "So is everything you lost," I replied, voice like velvet over steel. I left him standing there. The tournament itself blurred into a symphony of quiet. Shuffles, sharp glances, and the dull clink of chips. I played like I lived. Steady, watchful, unafraid of folding when I needed to. I didn't need to win the pot. That wasn't the point. But I did make it to the final table. And when I looked across the green felt at the last opponent, a grizzled man with a tired laugh and quick eyes, I smiled. Not because I had the better hand, but because I knew how to hold mine without trembling. Afterward, I found Ryan in the parking lot. He was leaning against a rusted sedan, arms crossed. His expression was unreadable. "What is this?" he asked. "Some performance? Revenge?" "No," I said, walking past him. "Just a reminder." "Of what?" I turned to face him. That I was never the one who folded. I handed him an envelope. Inside were copies of the legal filings, bank theft evidence, custody agreements, and restraining orders. All neat, organized, undeniable. His jaw clenched. "You really think you're better than me now?" "No," I said, stepping into the cab that had just pulled up. "I always was. I just finally believe it." That night, back at the farmhouse, I poured myself a glass of honey tea and sat by the window. The wind chime tinkled gently. I opened the wooden box of poker winnings. Inside, I placed the Queen of Hearts card, the one that looked just a little like me. Then I picked up my sketch pad and began to draw again. Not out of grief or rage or survival, but from stillness, from truth, from the quiet, beautiful weight of becoming someone new. The air inside Golden Oak Casino buzzed with static energy, the kind of charge you feel in your teeth before lightning strikes. I moved through the space like I belonged there, because I did. Not as a wife, not as a supporting character in someone else's gamble, but as a woman with nothing left to prove. I passed tables where men hunched over cards, sweat on their brows and luck in their fists. Lights glittered off gold trim, Slot machines chirped in the distance like electronic birds too afraid to sleep. And then I saw him. Ryan. He stood near the bar, drink in hand, wearing the same smug grin I used to mistake for confidence. His jacket was wrinkled. His eyes had bags under them. He looked smaller. His eyes locked on me. For a brief second, I watched his expression falter. He scanned me like I was an illusion, but then the swagger returned, like muscle memory. "Well," he said as I approached, "didn't think you'd actually show." I smiled, not wide, not coy, just enough. "You still think I bluff?" He chuckled. "Didn't peg you for the dramatic type." "This isn't drama," I said, voice smooth. "It's closure." He lifted his glass. "Sure, closure. Let me guess. You're here to prove something?" I tilted my head slightly, keeping eye contact. "No, Ryan. I'm here to finish what you started." He didn't have a comeback for that. At the table, I was unshakable. I wore that calm like perfume, invisible but undeniable. The players glanced at me with a mix of curiosity and mild condescension. Let them. I wasn't playing them. I was playing for me. Ryan hovered nearby, just close enough to watch, just far enough to pretend he wasn't. We played for hours. I folded when I needed to, raised when it counted, and let the silence between moves speak louder than bravado ever could. Then came the hand. 2 queens. The same card I'd painted to resemble myself. The one I'd slipped into my purse that morning. The other player, older, experienced, raised. I called. Another raise. I called again. The room got quieter, the way it always does before someone breaks. On the river, I won. A clean flush. Chips clinked as I pushed them forward. Not with a smirk or a victory speech, but with the grace of someone who no longer needs to be loud to be seen. Ryan was staring. Afterward, I found him outside, in the cool night air behind the casino. The parking lot buzzed under flickering yellow lights. He lit a cigarette with hands that shook just enough to betray him. "You think this makes you better than me?" he said before I could open my mouth. I took a breath, then reached into my clutch and handed him an envelope. His brow furrowed. He opened it slowly. Inside, custody papers, financial statements, proof of his unauthorized withdrawals, a copy of the foreclosure notice, title transfer for the car, now fully in my name, and a clean list of my legal ownership of the house. It was all there. Tidy. Undeniable. He flipped through them with growing disbelief. His lips parted, but no words came. Then, finally, "You were never this smart." I met his eyes. No heat, no venom, just truth. "I was always this smart. You just never bothered to see it." He looked like he'd been slapped. I stepped closer, just enough to let him feel the weight of what he'd lost, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. "You left me bleeding in a hospital bed while you chased cards. You let me raise our daughter alone while you chased flattery from strangers. You gambled with my heart like it was spare change, and now you've lost the only thing that ever held any real value." His eyes flicked away. "You think you're the victim?" "No," I said softly. "I was. Not anymore." He didn't speak again. I walked away. My heels clicked softly against the pavement as I returned to the cab. Inside, my daughter slept in her car seat, a soft lullaby humming from the radio. Her cheeks were rosy from sleep. A faint smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, like she was dreaming something gentle. I buckled myself in beside her and closed the door. As we pulled away, I looked out the window at the casino shrinking in, the distance. The lights blurred in my vision, not from tears, but from peace. In the rearview mirror, I wasn't running anymore. Back home, I slipped out of my dress and into a soft cotton robe. The night air came through the farmhouse window. In quiet waves, I sat at the vanity, the same one Lana had given me, its wood worn, its mirror clean, and looked at my reflection. No makeup. No armor, just me. I picked up the silver ring sitting on the edge of the table. A simple band, no stone. Just something I'd bought myself with the first art sale that covered rent. I slid it onto my finger, not as a symbol of marriage, but of promise, to myself. To never forget who I became. To never let anyone dim me again. To live as boldly as the woman who walked into a casino, not to win, but to end a story on her terms. Some nights, I still think about the girl I used to be. The one who painted a nursery before he ever offered to build a crib. The one who waited in a hospital bed, watching the door. The one who whispered, "You deserved better." So did I. And I thank her, because without her, I wouldn't be here now, whole, unfolded, free.